Hi, friends. Welcome to Sonido CUMBIATON, a podcast where we talk arts, culture, politics, and all that mess, but from
an undocumented and queer perspective.
My name is DJ Sizzle, and joining me is my absolutely gorgeous co-host,
Julio Salgado. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and share this with a friend, a comadre, your tia, your lover, and follow us on social media and TikTok at CUMBIATON_LA. So follow us on social media, share the clips. Don't mind our pauses. It's 8:30 in the morning. Pero, amiga, ¿cómo estás?
Amiga.
¿Cómo andamos?
We out here, girl. We're trying still to survive this wild ass timeline, but I'm so happy to be here checking in with you and the amazing guests that we are going to have today. But more on that soon. Friend, how was your weekend? ¿Cómo estás tú?
Girl, it was a good weekend. It's funny. One of my constant complaints on this podcast is my energy as I'm getting older, kind of going lower and lower. Last weekend, I had a very social weekend. I went to see Sierra. Well, okay, so Saturday, let's start with the Saturday. Saturday, I went to Downey Pride because you know how like now all the cities here in LA, we have a bunch of little prides. And so there was Downey Pride. It was my first time. It was kind of like a little farmers market. And it was fun. It was fun. Bambi performed her cumbia. She just released a cumbia song, La Cumbia del Movimiento, and she performed it there. I was like, girl, proud of you. Handle it. Also Luscious Massacre. I don't know if you've seen her. She's been going viral with her like Don't Do It Little Girl. And she goes around. She's from the Valley in Texas, and so she was there. The way that TikTok stars are now these stars are just fascinating, and to have this brown woman she's from Brownsville, Texas. Pablo came along. We went to Downey Pride, and it was just fabulous. But one thing I will have to say is that because we will be hosting soon an event that is coming up, and being a host for the gays is hard. Like the gay audiences, girl, are hard to please, and so I saw the hosts were fabulous, but some of the gays in the audience were just like, I'm not impressed by that. So that was a little bit intimidating because we're hosting something soon, but nonetheless, it was fun. Previous to that, I had gone and recorded a little something with our friend Curly Vasquez. No, that was the next day. See, I can't keep track. It was a full weekend. And then later that night on Sunday, I went to go see our friend Sierra Santana's sketch comedy, A Dynasty Typewriter. Shout out to Jenny Yang, who was also a guest. And it was great. It was a great full weekend. However, by Monday, my energy was down. I didn't want to do anything. So this past weekend, the one that we just passed, my husband got COVID, and so he stayed with his family. So I had the apartment to ourselves, and I was just bashed out. I was like, I think from now on, whenever I have such a full weekend, I need like a full 3 weekends to recuperate. Who would have told me that was going to be my life?
Who would have told you en tus buenos tiempos that you would not do 4-day ragers?
And then the following weekend, next, party, planes, lectures.
Bus, another club, airplane, talks.
Peleas en el metro.
ER, hospital visits,
Girl,
pizza.
Have we told that story, the ER story? We have told it, right?
I don't think we've told it just yet, but maybe that will come up in another episode.
Maybe
You'll have to stay tuned.
For an episode about health and how you denied being my wife, but that's another story for another time. But yeah, so I had a very, the past 2 weekends were very different, and I loved it. Sucked that my husband got COVID. Girls, stay masked. Right now, there's a surge in COVID. So if you're feeling a little sick, please put on your mask. Don't get people sick out here because we're not trying to do that. But that was my last 2 weekends since I saw you. How was your
Yeah.
weekend?
Yeah, my weekend was a little bit better than the weekend before, similar to your husband. Mine got COVID as well.
Did they
So,
hang out?
I don't know, girl, are they friends behind our
Are they
back?
friends and they're not telling us?
So they're both like big time antiquers,
God.
thrifters. They love, love, love like a good old piece of like furniture or anything vintage, right? So that's what they share in common. Now, along with getting COVID back to back. So I've also got COVID a couple of weeks ago and it laid him out for like a week. So I was on like, enfermera duties, making sure he was okay, making sure it didn't get worse. And similar to Julio, right? I think it's important to always remind folks, even though the pandemic is over, or so a lot of us think, this virus is still out. So do yourselves a favor, mask up if you're in crowded places, mask up if, you're at the club if possible, right? It's a constant reminder, right, that, our health should never just be something that we don't think about, especially in this day and age, especially as, this country and this administration has told us time and time again that, unfortunately, our health and our well being is not valuable to them. It is valuable to us, it is valuable in our communities. Therefore, we have to learn how to take better care of one another. And sometimes that can mean just sharing these resources or a friendly reminder. It's not over, and please take care of yourselves if you, however it is that you can. But other than that, this week was a little bit easier for us. He was better enough to perform at this amazing worldwide accordion festival that happens in the Bay Area. His band, Disco Resaca, Mariposas del Alma, Dulce Eclipse, headlined both Saturday and Sunday. And it was such a vibe. Our friend Jesus was also there taking pictures and, vibing out. And he can share a little bit more también later on. But, it was really great to be in a place where, accordion music from all over the world was showcased, presented. We also had the honor of hosting our friend from Colombia, Jason Landero, who is Andrés Landero's grandson. Yes, ma'am. If you know of the Legacia Landero, you know how important they have been to the cumbia scene, the birthplace of cumbia in Colombia. So it's always an honor to be able to, be able to work internationally, even though we have not been able to leave the country per se to like really focus on our art and like make those artistic connections. We're able to make them here, and it's always a pleasure to be able to do that. So shout out to Disco Resaca, Mariposas del Alma, Deuce Eclipse, and Jason Landero, who headlined this weekend's festivals. I also had the amazing opportunity to play for an iconic pop-up here in the Bay Area. If y'all know Chef Dominica, who is the owner and chef at Bombera, Oakland, she is known as one of the food titans in the Bay Area. Her restaurant has actually received a Michelin star. So y'all better put some respect on Chef
Boom.
Dominica's name.
Boom.
And she is so like amazing, super sweet. She's a Chicana who fuses the Mexican American culture and cuisine through her food. And let me tell you, it is bomb.com. Again, if you are in the Bay Area, make sure you check out Bombera. And she had a pop up down at the Hammer Museum at Lulu Restaurant. If you don't know the Hammer Museum in LA, it's one of the prestigious museums down in LA. It's by UCLA. It's on the west side. So it was really beautiful to take up space and really showcase not only her food, the culture, but also music. I was fortunate enough to be invited as the DJ for the tardeada. And this tardeada was in efforts to also fundraise for immigrant communities. So, they were there with Chirla, and it was pretty awesome, because I think for me, it's super important to continue to fuse music and activism however we can, because although we try and kind of think through things as like we have to keep going, right, the attacks, unfortunately, within our community are also, still rampant. I wanted to bring to our conversation two cases that have been heavy, like on my mind and in my heart. One in particular, right, of Xochitl, who is a DACA recipient. And on Instagram, it's Free Gata Now. You can follow them on Instagram. But Xochitl is a DACA recipient who was detained at El Paso airport since August 3rd, boarding a domestic flight using her work permit. Again, if you don't know about DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, this is supposed to protect you and give you a work permit to work legally here in the US. But this is one of those first cases that we're seeing. I think there was another one earlier in the year where DACA recipients are also being detained indefinitely by ICE. She is still in El Paso Detention Center. So please, if you can, continue to share about her detention, continue to write letters of support. They are asking folks to continue to, uplift these cases because, a lot of the times we get swept under the rug and we don't know what happens to our people. But Gata has been organizer and active immigrant rights movement leader for many, many years. And it's important that we also back them up. And another case, really quickly before I wrap it up, I don't know if y'all saw this, but a Jamaican cop from Miami, Florida, was also detained in an ICE raid and is now in deportation proceedings, even though he had a legal work permit that was proven legal and valid through E-Verify. So again, this just goes to show how flawed this system truly is. And it begs the question that we've all kind of known the answer to, right? Are the ICE raids truly about law and order? Or are they about upholding white supremacy and trying to get rid of people of color? Because if they are detaining people that are here in the country legally, whatever that means, and we can get into that a little bit later because I think we are. Um, it also just kind of, again, makes you think about, just what is really going to happen in the foreseeable future to folks that are here legally, folks that have a DACA work permit, right? So again, it's answers that we've already known, but again, this just goes to show, right? Like it's never been about truly law and order since they've even arrested the person whose sole job is to keep law and order, right? So who is above the law and who is not? So yeah, those are some of the things that have been heavy on my mind. And today, Julio, I know we're going to be talking about, last episode, we talked about choices, right? And how many of us are also starting to contemplate choices where if, a detention was to happen, a deportation was to happen to us or our families, what would that look like? And we thought truly about what we can only say what our experience is on this side. But I know, Julio, you have also had conversations with folks who have made either the voluntary choice to leave or have been deported. So I'm going to let you, Julio, take it away and introduce our next guest.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much for that. So clearly a lot in our mind, right? And yeah, so our guest today, I met him. Well, actually, haven't met him in person. We've only met, or unless we did meet in person, I don't remember when you were here. But Lalo Aguilar, not to be confused with the Aguilar family. Family. I don't think there's any connection. You let us know, Lalo. But Lalo is a deported filmmaker and storyteller born in Ciudad Juarez and raised in Herbert City, Utah. Lalo studied screenwriting at Facultad de Cine in Mexico City and currently studies film production at Centro de Capacitación Cinematográfica. Wow. He debuted as a film director in 2023 with his feature documentary El Digno Retorno and is a narrator and poet in the award-winning animated film Home is Somewhere Else. An artist. We love artists. Best Feature Animation in the Mexican Academy Awards in 2023. He has been a keen promoter for deportee creativity on the south side of the border and currently documents the return migration experience between Ciudad Juárez and Central Mexico. Welcome, Lalo, to Sonido Cumbiaton. Hello.
Hey, Julio. Hey, Cecil.
Hi, Lalo.
Pues muchas gracias. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to our conversation, and also, nada que ver con los otros Aguilar, eh? Nada que ver. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We actually have met Julio. I tell you, but like you guys don't remember. I met Julio and Jesus in 2011 at a United We Dream event in Fort Worth. And but you guys don't remember. You guys ya eran muy populares ustedes. Yo apenas estaba acá empezando. Pero yeah, I met you guys there, and you guys were the ones that pues me empujaron a querer like tell stories. Like I saw that you guys were telling our stories of growing up undocumented, different, and I was like, man, like those guys are awesome. Yo quiero ser como ellos. and yeah, so like we have met, and it has been really awesome to see como estos últimos años there has been the shift, no? Como este shift of the undocumentedness and the way we are telling our stories.
Yeah. Well, my bad. 2011 was a very long time ago, and ya estoy cuarentón y se me va la onda a veces. And so sometimes I'll see a person, I'm like, we've met before, and either I know them through Instagram, and they just look familiar, and I think we know them, but clearly we know each other. And Jesus, your fault too, because you didn't remember either. We forget. But Lalo, we reconnected recently this year to support your group Raíces y Rumbos. With a film screening that you you kind of put together in different parts of the country, with students from Centro de Capacitación Cinematográfica in Mexico City. The short film screening not only showed amazing work from Mexican directors, but it also served as a fundraiser to provide resources for deported women and children. Lalo, you had to restart your life in Mexico after living in the US, and you actually explored the experience in your 2023 documentary, El Digno Retorno. How was the transition from living here in the US for so many years to going back to Mexico? And how cathartic was it to make a documentary about this experience?
Yeah, well, I think whenever I get asked this question because of the work that I've been done, like people hit me up all the time, like people I grew up with or people just through Instagram, even though I'm not really active there, they have questions, no? And I think when you say growing up in the US, something that we gotta think about is que each state is so different. Like I grew up in Utah. I grew up in a small town up in the forest. My experience, my undocumented experience, was so much different than if I was to grow up in New York, in Brooklyn, or Chicago, or LA. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. Like. And I didn't really think about it either. I was just a kid from Heber. I was just a kid from the mountains, like until I got deported and I started working at a call center. And then I started meeting other people from other states. And that's when I was like, okay, so like the undocumented experience is so diverse and so complex that's going to impact our return experience and the way we perceive our experience here in Mexico, because if you grew up around Mexicans, puro paisa, always Spanish, then you come over here and it's Spanish, like in paisa, the culture, you were more involved. But if you grew up like in a little town in, I don't know, Idaho or Montana with no paisas, then the culture shock's going to be so different. So I think that's something that's not very talked about, like how each state is so, it's so different. So that's going to impact how you see it. So the transition for me, like I mentioned, I grew up in a small Mormon town. There were barely any Mexicans. There were no African Americans at all, just white and a little percentage of Mexicans. So yeah, and then I arrived to Juarez after having growing up in the mountains, in the forest, camping, fishing. Then coming to Juarez when it was one of its, it was coming out of its most violent moment. But I went through a lot of violent scenarios my first couple months there, so I had to kind of like get away from Juarez, and I just started moving around a lot. That was my transition. A lot of moving around from state to state within the first few years. And my dad's Chilango, so I came here. I left Juarez because it was too dangerous. Because I have a tattoo on my back that was like a mark que I wasn't supposed to have, and I didn't know. I just grew up in Hebron, so I left Juarez and came to Mexico City to meet my dad's side of the family, and I ended up just staying here for a bit and moving back and forth. But I always end up here in Mexico City. So the transition's so different for everybody. Like that was my experience. But I think from the work that I've been doing for the last few years, I've been around deportees, doing work with deportees and people who are forced to return in different states. So I've gotten a lot of insight on the diverse and complex experiences. No?
Oh yeah, 100%. You're so right though, because even here, and when you meet other undocumented folks from New York to come to California, they feel like we're here in California, everything's so slow, and then New York is like fast paced. So I can see that. What would you say? And by the way, Jesus and Sizzle, please jump in. I'll just have the next question, and then you guys can take it up. But I'm just curious. Now that you're been there for how long have you been back in Mexico now?
I've been back for 12 years, man.
12 years. So what would you say now that you're there for 12 years? What are the biggest misconceptions that you hear about Mexico from fellow undocumented folks, especially your compatriotas, fellow Mexicans here in the US, that you hear about, Mexico? What are some of the misconceptions that you hear?
Man, I was thinking about this question, and I don't think there are really any misconceptions because, like, really, it's so diverse. So the experience is so different. Like, I don't know, like, and Mexico's not the same as when our parents left. It's not the same Mexico that we're coming back to, and we're coming back with more resources because we speak English. Like, and yeah, there's work, but there's not the pay is not well at all. It's not a good pay. So like the misconceptions, I think there's not a lot of misconceptions because it's so different. Some people say it's dangerous, and some people say it's not because it has not happened to them. But so if that's the thing about the raza, if it hasn't happened to you, it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
That's what's happening. If I've had violent things happen to me in Mexico, but also I've had a lot of beautiful things happen to me here in Mexico. That's the thing. Like maybe if you grew up in the States your whole life and you never fell in love, then you get deported and fall in love for the first time here in Mexico, then you love Mexico. This is where you fell in love and had those experiences. But what if it's vice versa? What if the love of your life was over there? You were living that life with the person or you had kids, and then you get deported, then you're kind of miserable like the first few years or whatever, or you want to go back and that's you're the next day you're back because you have the resources or you have the money or you got to go back because you have kids. So yeah, it depends. A lot of people talk from their experience, like, but I don't think there are really a lot of misconceptions because this country is really, I'll tell you, like one of the biggest misconceptions right now is that the Mexican government is looking out for our well-being. That's a big misconception, I think. Like most of the thing, because right now we got a woman president and Morena this, Morena that. It's I think it's a big misconception that they're looking out for our best interests. Most of the programs that you see, they didn't just come up with it, like it's people who have returned or have gotten deported, who have been lobbying, who have been doing the policy work, who have pushed for years for these little things, these little wins to be there. and it still doesn't work 100%, but yeah, I think that's a big misconception that because whatever when it comes to migration, return migration, or especially people who are in transit to Mexico, it's whatever the U.S. says. Whatever the U.S. says is what the Mexican government will do. Like they stopped. Now they started having the flights here to Mexico City again, deportation flights, but they weren't having deportation flights. They weren't arriving here in Mexico City for a while because DHS said the further they're away from the border, the harder it's going to be for them to cross back. So now they were sending them the Trump administration said send them all the way to the southern border. So now the flights are going all the way to the southern border, and they're being dropped off in Chiapas, in Tabasco, to make it hard for them to come back. And people aren't even from those states, So now they got to take another bus and come all the way up to their state. So like, I think that's a big misconception. But regarding the way of life here in Mexico, it's just so different, like depends how you come back. Did you come back with money? Do you have some resources? Maybe you had a house in the States and you're renting and you're just living here off your rent. You're living good, there's all types of scenarios.
Thank you so much, Lalo, for sharing all of that. And not us echándole porras a la Claudia girl and
Well,
just to be
it's
like,
politicians. Politicians are going to politic,
yeah,
right? And I think we've known that for a while. So thank you for clarifying that. I think if
absolutely.
anybody expects any politician from any part of the world to like save us, we've learned that it's each other if we're going to save ourselves.
Oh, yeah, like
Absolutely.
there's this thing where like a lot of people, especially like the whole uh, dreamer narrative, no? Like it's crazy to see how in the last 10 years or so, the whole dreamer narrative has shifted, has come down here to Mexico as well, because people think that, in the US, we're used as political pawns, they use us. But once you arrive here, it's the same thing. There was this thing that was happening like when was like 10, 12 years ago that we called what were we calling that? A lot of politicians were bringing in DACA recipients and parading them in front of cameras, taking them to fancy restaurants. And yeah, did you go?
No, no, girl. He's
I know
like,
some of
I
the
thought I
I know
saw
some of
you,
the girls that
girl.
went. I know some of the girls that went. I'm like,
Yeah,
get your advance pro, girl.
yeah,
I
yeah,
almost went to. I
Hmm.
was too scared to do it.
yeah.
Hmm.
But like, see, and they used that. The politicians were using that. There were even like dreamer commercials back then. Un dreamer es alguien que creció allá en Estados Unidos y estudian y esto. There were commercials going on like 10, 12 years ago. Um, you see, and then these people, they come on Advanced Pro, they were paraded around through these spaces, and then they go with their families and stuff, but then they go back, and that was, everyone has their return experience, whether it's through advanced parole, through deportation, through course return, through deportation of a family member. And like I said, it's so different. And that's your experience. That's you, which is, it's not good or bad. That's just your experiences. And that's the hardest thing for me to answer. Like, oh, ¿cómo está allá en Mexico? What can I do? Is like, it's so diverse, like, if I had kids when I got deported, I would have tried to jump my ass back in caliente.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I didn't have kids, and I was in the process of a U visa, so I didn't. Like I have got my visa denied twice now,
Oh,
and
no.
but yeah, like it's just so different.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Lalo. And it's a shame, like there's a lot of talk about, trying to do things, obviously, kind of like the legal way, right? That a lot of people try and kind of just throw in our face, right? Like, you should try to do this, you should try to apply, but people really don't know just how hard it is. And as you're saying, right, a lot of the times you get denied. And a lot of the times, you get used, whether it's as a political pawn or in, just the dreamer rhetoric as a whole. I know, Jesus, you also entered a question here, and I wanted to give you space to also ask that since, Lalo has touched a little bit more on this topic.
Yeah. Just given the fact that you just mentioned that Mexico had commercials, propaganda, political opportunities for different politicians to parade these DACA recipients in front of cameras and so forth for maybe their own benefit. Um, I wonder how the Mexican population, painting in broad strokes, how they view DACA recipients who are returning. Is it a problem for them? Is it a problem just given the fact that, earlier you stated maybe there isn't as many resources or well-paying jobs? um, do they accept them with open arms? Like, hey, maybe this is a person who can help with resources, or is this person going to inhibit opportunities for Mexicans who were born here and have lived here their whole lives? I wonder how the Mexican, and to the extent, of course, that every state is different. In general, how do Mexicans feel about dreamers who are returning? Is it messing with the whole conversation around gentrification? I'm so curious about how Mexicans are accepting and or living with the fact that there are folks who are returning, folks like
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
yeah, bro. That's a good question because depends where the Mexican, let's say just the Mexican people from here from Mexico who never migrated. Depends where they get their information from. If they have a relative who grew up in the States, let's say nephew, niece who comes back deported, then they get to interact with that person. Maybe understand. Maybe at first they don't understand them, but then they get, if they're living with them, with the grandma, with the aunt, with the tios, primos, then they'll get to know them maybe. But if it's a person who doesn't have a relative who has gone through this, maybe they just saw it on the news, because in 2018, when Trump was coming into office, uh, there was this, what can I say? Mexico in 2018, they were going through all this propaganda on the news, like we got to get ready for Trump. AMLO is gonna save us, blah blah. So they started coming out with all these programs back then. That's also when we started all that the organization that I used to work with. I used to be a part of. Cops, did you hear? Did you se escuchó? But yeah, in 2018, we felt like there was this need to fight back, no, or have a space for people who grew up in the States like us to come to, a space where they felt safe, a space where they felt understood. And so we started this organization in 2018. We're in downtown Mexico City, but also the Mexican government also started their strategies, no? And deportation was something greatly talked about in 2018. There was a lot of movement around deportation here in Mexico, especially in Mexico City, because this is where like a lot of like the policy work happens. So there was a lot of mesas de trabajo, they call it here, mesas de trabajo, where you sit down with politicians, talk about the needs of this population. And so there were a lot of commercials going on, and a lot of academics were putting in their 2 cents, still talking about the whole dreamer thing. In 2018, there was academics all over Mexico just barely getting on the whole growing up undocumented thing. It was like a surprise to them that there were kids growing up undocumented in 2018. They were barely starting to talk about that. And there were all these commercials, and politicians, man, everyone wanted to get a piece of that, the whole deportation topic, like que estaban ayudando, when really they didn't know, no sabían ni madres, they didn't know shit. They were coming to us or other organizations like, what is happening to you guys? Can you tell us more? Like literally they'll come up like this with a notebook and start writing. I see. It was stupid. Academics in the U.S. and Mexico. So politicians were all over the news saying, if you are a deportee, we're going to welcome you with open arms. You're going to have this, you're going to have that. And if you speak English, you'll have a job immediately because you speak English. You can be an English teacher. But here, even like the smallest jobs sometimes ask for a licenciatura, a bachelor's, So a lot of people who speak English, who grew up like me, I don't have a bachelor's, I never got my bachelor's in the States nor here, but I spoke English, but I couldn't get these English speaking jobs because I didn't have a bachelor's, even though I have 2 diplomas in English teaching that I got at university here, but I didn't have a bachelor's. So I couldn't get into those jobs. And in 2018, there was all this talk, if you speak English, you're going to have a job, nada te va a faltar, while at the same time, as I'm shooting my documentary, there's homeless deportees all over the Zócalo, Bellas Artes, the touristy places. A lot of homeless people there don't even speak Spanish because they're deportees. My documentary talks a little bit about that, but so yeah, like depends where people here get their information. Like there was a whole dreamer thing, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, eres un dreamer? Eres un dreamer?" When I told them like that I grew up in the States and most of my life, "Oh, entonces eres un dreamer." Like no, like I personally never fell into that. Even though I was for the movement, I was in the Dream Act movements over there, but I had a criminal record. I knew I couldn't be part of that, you know. So, but here it's like, "Oh, eres un dreamer." O eres un cholo that got deported por el desmadre, o eres un dreamer, nada más.
And Lalo, you bring up your documentary. I haven't seen it, but I was watching a review about it, and one of the things that the person that was reviewing your documentary brought up was the fact that you bring up alcoholism, right? People that go back, and I think the beauty and the of art and filmmaking is that you're able to paint a more complicated picture of the issue. And so, like, the fact that you were bringing this other things, were key. How did you make that decision of like, oh, I want to make sure that people also know that people are dealing with alcoholism and they can access. One of the other things that you talk about was like trying to get their papers to work in Mexico and they couldn't access to those things, right? Like, how was that decision making made to add it to your documentary?
Man, well, the process of the documentary was really long and intense because now also am I trying to learn how to make a documentary, trying to learn how to make film, but I'm also being atravesado through this post-deportation processes. I'm going through this post-deportation processes while at the same time trying to learn how to make film. I wasn't just like a filmmaker, like come and from the outside, coming to tell these deportation stories. I'm a deportado going through, even though it's years after, it seems like for many of us, the post-deportation experience doesn't end. It's an ongoing cycle because our families are still over there dealing with stuff. So that, me personally, that affects me, like emotionally, mental health. Like, so I'm going through all this post-deportation experiences while trying to make a film. So I made the film. I just learned how to make a film like while doing it, because I couldn't get into some film schools and stuff. And I got into some film school and they disappeared with our money. And but anyways, like, well, I was trying to make the film. I recorded for like 2-3 years. Then when it was time to edit, I was going through all my footage, and I had a lot of pretty intense stuff when it has to do with the deported homeless people that are here in Mexico City. And I just felt like a piece of shit. I was like, I can't put this, I can't leave that on. I don't want to show this side only. Because there was a lot of drug use and homelessness and stuff with the homies that are in the film, and I didn't show that part. I just show with the homeless people. I show in my film. It's only a little bit. It's only like 10 minutes, and I show a lot of people there, but I don't show like the crazy intense part. And the part where it has to do with alcoholism is it's a little scene donde estamos yo y my best friend here, who also grew up in Utah, and we met here. And we're going through a little moment there in that scene. But it's really tough when you're also part of a community, and like, how do I portray, how do I make us seem like just regular folks going through some shit and not like victimize our community, I think that's a very important question to ask yourself when you're creating for tu comunidad.
Absolutely, especially for a very particular sector of this community that, a lot of us are kind of going through this turmoil currently during this administration, right? And these questions about, do we stay and do we fight? Do we wait and, see what happens? What happens if, ourselves or somebody that we love gets deported? And I think, your film is super important to that, and your perspective through your experience, right, is something that we should all be taking into account. So I want to ask just a couple of closing questions that maybe you can elaborate based on your experience. So when someone gets deported or decides to go back to Mexico, what are some of those immediate steps they need to take?
Man, me la pones difícil, me la estás poniendo bien difícil.
And again, this is just and it's not, I don't want you to be like, oh, well, I have to be the voice for all
Yeah,
deportees,
yeah,
but I'm just
yeah.
saying, like, in terms of like your experience, some of these
Mhm.
tips that people can take, because as I mentioned, right, there's a lot of like questions and choices ultimately that we are all contemplating. There's a lot of family preparedness plans that a lot of us are doing with our parents, with ourselves. What would happen if, right? So I think, you have a very unique perspective as somebody who has already gone through this. And 12 years later is still kind of dealing with the repercussions of that. And as you're saying, right, like the mental health, especially through this administration, you cannot separate that because you're still living that through family over here. And also, like, possibly even planning, like having a backup plan. What would happen if our friends or families were to go to, wherever, whichever country they're from, right? What are some of those next steps that you would suggest people would take?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can only talk about Mexico since this is where I've been doing a lot of community and organizing. And I'm not really into lobbying anymore, but my girl is, so I listen to that every day, like the stuff that goes down.
Hmm.
And I think we got to make a difference between deportation and enforced return, which now they're calling it self-deport, but that's another topic.
Hmm.
If you're getting deported, you're not going to have the time to grab your stuff. If you have family to help you out, like, you're not going to have time to grab your stuff. So when you get deported, I think the best thing to do is, if you're in detention, while you're in detention center, try to get a hold of organizations here in Mexico who could help you. Or maybe if you're, because you don't know where you're going to get deported at. It could be at the border, northern border, it can be at the southern border, it can be here in Mexico City. And there's flights in Puebla and Guadalajara as well. And so I think stay in touch as much as you can with organizations here, so we keep a lookout here to see where you're gonna see where we can find you, because sometimes either you don't have a phone on you, or sometimes people won't let you use their phones. And even this camps that this administration here in Mexico has set up, they have set up different camps. Sometimes they won't let you use the phone in there. We've had uh, because after you're in the camp, they let you sleep there at tops 3 days. But for someone who doesn't have any family here in Mexico, because there's a lot of people who have no family here in Mexico at all, and or long relatives that don't even know you. Like, after those 3 days, where do you go? After those 3 days that you're allowed, they kick you out after 3 days in those camps
Hmm.
that the administration set up. So like, you gotta have like a plan on where to go. Phone call, or try to remember phone numbers, because like I said, sometimes they don't. It's tough nowadays. I remember when we were little, like everyone, we used to remember phone numbers. Now is like what? Yeah, try to remember phone numbers. And when you get deported, they give you this letter. It's called a carta de repatriación, and that's your ID here. Because many of us who didn't grow up here, we don't have an ID here, an INE. And sometimes you get it at the consulados, but they won't accept it here. Uh, so the carta de repatriación is going to be like your ID that says, look, I got deported. And that's how you can get the 2,000 pesos that the administration is giving out. And that's how you can get around transportation. So don't lose that. Whoever's listening to this, or tell your family members, don't lose your carta de repatriación if you get deported. That's going to be a big help. Get a hold of nonprofits. The nonprofit, I think, not just because she's my girl, but my girl Rosie, she grew up in Wisconsin. She's a returnee, and she does the work on the ground. And she works for IMUMI, el Instituto para las Mujeres en la Migración, and you can get a hold of them. And also, and if you return, if you're a course to return, then yeah, you have more time to make plans. If you have kids, all their paperwork, get the apostilla, even though they're not supposed to be asking for it here in Mexico, but get your apostilla so you can do uh, paperwork here, either double nationality or get them into school. But you need that apostilla now because the government still asks for it. But get the apostilla, get your kids' paperwork in order. Try to yeah, make a plan. What kind of plan can you make? Like, where are you gonna come back to? Like, did your parents have a house here when they left? A lot of parents didn't. Luckily, my parents did, and that's has helped me because my parents had a house. Like, so that made my deportation experience different. But there's a lot of people who don't have a house to come back to. So yeah, it's I think that's the difference between if you get deported or if you are coerced to return. You have more time to make plans, but get your paperwork in order.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lalo, for sharing your insights, your suggestions, and perspective as somebody who was forced to return to Mexico. We are greatly appreciative of your time, of you sharing your experience with us, as you have shed a lot of insight to all of us, that, again, a veces pensamos nosotros of scenarios or different ideas because we haven't necessarily experienced it. We are not there, right? We think of Mexico and what a force or, just a return that we would look like. But hearing your experience has definitely shed a lot of light, and thank you again for joining us and for, just sharing your experience with us. Please, y'all, don't forget to check out his film. And Lalo, if you have any other projects that you're currently working on that you would like for our audience to listen to, please feel free to share them with us.
Yeah, definitely. I do have. Well, first of all, if anybody wants to check out the film, like, we can get in touch. Se las puedo enviar. Like, I've been doing screenings with just people who ask for it at their houses. If you're undocumented, yeah, I'll send it to you. Like, and watch it with your friends because we all have questions. It was shot in 2018, 2019, but it's so relevant right now. Like, and also, we are starting a project. It's called Unauthorized Movimiento. And Unauthorized Movimiento is basically a project made up of deportees and returnees who want to do film or music, audiovisual work. And we can talk about that another time.
Well, thank you so much, Lalo. Definitely will be checking all that out. And listen, movie night. Let's watch the work that fellow immigrants, returnees are doing, because what a better way to hear about these stories and the people that are living in themselves, right? And so now we're gonna make a pivot, and stick with culture, right? Because Lalo, you just spoke to a lot of these things that are keeping us up at night. And clearly, there's so many things that are relevant to your experience, right? Your socioeconomic status, gender, sexuality, like what your situation is when you return, and even here in the US, right? And so one of the segments that we have here at Sonido Cumbiaton is what's on your cultural rotation. And that's sort of what are we watching? What are we reading? What is something in the culture that it's kind of making us, giving us a little joy in the middle of all this chaos? For me, I'll start and then I'll pass it on to you all. Y'all can tell me what y'all watching, or if there's something that you want to mention. As somebody who's been, using comics as a way to document the immigrant experience. If you haven't checked out my Good Immigrant, Bad Immigrant comic strip for the LA Times, check it out. But I've been really focusing on reading graphic memoirs. And I just finished Spent by Alison Bechdel. And I love Alison Bechdel. She wrote Fun Home, and Alison Bechdel is part of have you heard the Bechdel test, which, it's like if you watch a movie and how the storylines of women in films, it's called the Bechdel test, to see how much how much is focused on the female story. But her recent comic is called or graphic memoir is called Spent, and it's about climate. But it also talks about money and like this is a successful graphic memoir author, and like if she is dealing with being scared of her finances, I'm like, damn, we're all screwed. But it really delves into being scared of what's happening with the climate, right? Like no matter where in the world you are, I think that's a good one. And then another one that I'm also finishing right now, I'm almost done. You Can Never Die by Harry Bliss. He's a cartoonist for the New Yorker, and it's interesting about we're talking about what when you're telling the stories of our communities, right, and being scared to not portray ourselves in a good light or a bad light. Harry goes. It's a really good memoir because he goes into like his drug use and his alcohol use, right, and he talks about it so freely. He is a white man, but I'm like, damn, like I can't tell that story like that because there's consequences for me telling a story like that, right? So however, I think it's important to study what is selling, because these are top sellers. And as a graphic as somebody who wants to write a graphic memoir, studying what other people are making, it's very important. So that's in my cultural rotation. Sizzle, what's on your cultural rotation right now?
Yeah, so and thank you so much, Julio, for sharing what you are reading and the things that you are focusing on right now. For me, I've continued to reread some of the books that have been put out by undocumented or formerly undocumented folks. So one of my personal faves is The Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo. I want to say her last name is. I feel like sometimes I remember the first names more than the last names. But if you haven't already read it, and to me, it speaks on what's happening currently. Right, she wrote this book a couple years ago, and her experience with workers out in the East Coast. But now we're seeing things, undocumented workers out in the East Coast. But now we're starting to see, just how the workforce, wherever it's at, right, whether it's here in California, in New York, in Florida, right, how workers are continuously being targeted for being undocumented, right, and how for people like us, right, kind of growing up, similar to Lalo, Jesus, Julio, myself, right, here in the US, and just kind of feeling that whether it's uncertainty or feeling a different type of way in terms of like how we've been brought up in this American culture, right? And how we see our people as well and how they get taken advantage of, unfortunately. So that's a really great book that I've started to reread again, just because I think, rereading books for me also helps me a little bit understand and get, a bit of clarity also that these are not necessarily movements that have already passed. Like they are still applicable in today's day and age, right? Another book that I've been reading is Illegalized by Ivan. Again, I forget his last name, but we will plug it in. And it talks about movement building, right? Particularly undocumented youth movements here in the US. There is a chapter dedicated, by the way, to Cumbiaton, because if you all did not know, right, Cumbiaton was born out of the immigrant youth justice movements in, the 2010s to 2016s, right? And those books for me speak a lot on, again, just reminding us of our power as a collective movement, right? And our power as people, right? And communication. Discúlpame. It is a book by Rafael Martinez, and it is the illegalized undocumented youth movements in the United States. And again, it just kind of speaks to what people have done and what they have been able to do through their movements, right? And the reason for this podcast, right, Sonido Comiaton, we wanted to also be like just something to document, our experience as undocumented artists, as undocumented organizers. And it's something that, I think for me, I will always continue to try and showcase and highlight as best as we can and remind ourselves, right, that, we are not alone. There have been different people that have already gone through this. We're all still going through this. So that's what has been on my cultural rotation. Jesus and Lalo, if you either of y'all would like to share.
Man, well, if we're talking about books, yeah, empecé otra vez a escribir mi memoir. Well, I finished the memoir in 2016, but then I got into this filmmaking thing and dejé de hacerlo. But so I was like, no quiero saber nada de reading about undocumented or deportation or anything. So I just put that aside and I started reading in Spanish. For the whole time I've been here in Mexico, I didn't want to read in Spanish. De por sí no leo muchos libros, but definitely not in Spanish. So I was like, I'm gonna start reading Spanish because I'm in school and pues quiero aprender más de como cultura mexicana, ¿no? Like, and where things come from and stuff. So I just recently read this book que se llama La Plaga Burocrática. It's a very it's a because when you it's funny because when you arrive here to Mexico, one of the culture shocks that you'll see is que the bureaucracy que existe aquí en este país está bien cabrón. From the guard, there's at all this places como oficinas de gobierno and stuff that where you gotta go do trámites. There's always a guard in the front, and he's the first, like your first gate, así que no te deja pasar. Como si and it goes. There's like ladders, no como una hierarchy de burocracia aquí. La esa La Plaga Burocrática by Héctor Figueroa Raso. And it's funny, like, as you're reading this book, you're like, oh yeah, I've gone through that. Okay, that's why people are like this. Like, desde la persona que barre hasta el mero mero de una oficina, they always treat you like así como que es una mierda que estás haciendo en esa oficina. I'm doing you a favor, like así. Entonces, I just finished that book. Y sí, it gets you thinking, about the way this country works and it runs. And that book is from 76, 77, and it's so present right now. So yeah, eso es lo que estaba leyendo. No es tanto, puede ser cultura, pero I don't know if we're just talking about books o otras cosas también, música, or what's the deal here? How does this work?
Yeah, and it's anything and everything that you wanted to share. Jesus, if you wanted to share something about what you're reading, pero si no, también we can jump into our little music portion that happened at the Hollywood Bowl, but I'm going to let Jesus speak y después ya seguimos con lo demás.
Yeah, I really haven't been reading books, but I've been looking through different photo books just for inspiration. This photo book it's my favorite photo book that I picked up over the course of the last 5 years. As soon as I saw it at a book fair, I was immediately drawn to it. And the photographs are by Mexican photographer Melba Arellano. Can't really show it here because it blurs it out, but they're just portraits of different Mexican subjects in their space, in their homes. The way that the book is organized is by color palette, which
Ooh.
it's a whole different experience when you leaf through it. I really, really love it. Melba Arellano, if you're listening to this, please just know that I really love your book and I love your photography. And this sort of thing just gives me like hope that well, not hope, but a reaffirmation that even in circumstances where folks are limited in what they're able to create, beautiful art is still emanating and is still very prominent, and that in general just gives me a lot of hope and a lot of joy. So yeah, photo books, that's what I've been on these last several weeks.
Awesome. And maybe Jesus, we can share some of those photos on an Instagram post so that folks can get to know, what pictures you're talking about, the author and so Julio. Similarly, we could do that with your choices and Lalo's choices as well, so that the folks listening to can get a sense of, what we are talking about. But I did also want to bring up this is more of like a farandula topic, but also in relation to immigration. So over the weekend, the Aguilars, not to be confused with Lalo Aguilar, right? But the other Aguilars, the family that for whatever reason everybody loves to hate. But I mean, girl, they give so many reasons for everyone to be like, girl, are you being for reals right now? So over the weekend, Los Aguilares, featuring Pepe Aguilar, Angela Aguilar, Amor, right? They had their performance at the Hollywood Bowl. And they are the topic of another important conversation that, I think folks within the immigrant rights movement always have it, right? Particularly dreamers, right? Good immigrant, bad immigrant, legal immigrants, illegal immigrants. So there's a video of Pepe Aguilar and Angela Aguilar as well backing this up that basically says, like, we are legal Mexican Americans, and everybody who, tries to migrate should do it the legal way. And that, for me, and then I will open it up to you all, also kind of signals a little bit of this tone deaf, unfortunate, statement that a lot of us have constantly been trying to push back against, right? Because, wait, si todo lo hubiéramos hecho legal, right, we wouldn't be in this, like, if it was that easy, right, we wouldn't have be in the situations that we are, right? And it's kind of backpedaling on things that Angela Aguilar said in a previous concert, which is that, their patriarch, ¿cómo se llama? The Antonio Aguilar, right? He had been, undocumented for the majority of his career until he was finally able to adjust. But, he was detained at the border 4 times, right? He crossed illegally 4 times. He was able to adjust through whether it was adjustment, amnesty. I'm not too sure, right? So I'm going to leave that open. But, through that, he was able to also petition his family. He was also able to give his family a better quote unquote life, right? But it didn't happen just because he's like, well, this is the way we're going to do it. And, so I think there's this discourse that we really have to have about legalities, right? And the harmful rhetoric and narrative that that has, because as we've all known, right, Lalo, you expressed, you also tried to adjust in different ways and it was denied twice. Even when a lot of us or some of us try to adjust status for whatever reason, right, we get tripped up because this system was in place not to serve us but to keep us out. So I want to open it up to you all and just kind of, based on the comments that were made, what your thoughts around that are.
Is this thing on? Well, I mean, listen, I think that artists at a certain, level in their careers do lose sense of what the community actually does need. And I think this is an example of that, right? Like, I think because a lot of artists at that level are pressured to speak on current issues, I don't think that they are necessarily the people who should speak on behalf of folks. And I can understand why they're being asked to because they have such a huge platform. But girl, to me, it's like if you don't really have like something good to say, and if you're not really well informed about what the community is going through, girl, just go on stage and sing. You don't have to say anything. It's okay. You don't have to comment on every single thing that is affecting the community because you end up with things like this, right? And of course, people are saying like, oh, you're only seeing one side of the story. You're not, I was there. He was referring to the marches to do that legally. So whatever, right? Whatever his intention was. Oh, Pablo was there. Paula was there, and so one of her producers says that he was there, and so it really to me it's like if you are if you're not connected to the community like that, you don't need to speak on everything. People with that kind of fame, I don't know. It's just I don't stay. There's times that I don't speak on things that I am not well informed. Instead, I'm gonna like do my research and see what's up, right? But to say things like this are so archaic and saying like do it the legal way, stand in line is like girl, what line? That's why thank you, Lalo, for coming up, and being our guest today for speaking like there when you're trying to do it the legal way, the bureaucracy and the challenges to do that, it's impossible. So he can sit down, just keep singing. I love me some songs from Pepe Aguilar.
Here's the thing though, because I saw the clip multiple times. Um, I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I just think that just given the fact of how things are playing out on a political level, I think that his intention or their intention was largely, I feel positive, but incredibly misinformed. And I feel like a lot of artists these days, the way that and by we, I mean society, we give them such a massive platform that oftentimes, particularly if you're an artist and you're uninformed and you don't know the nuances of things the way that we do, people who are involved in this particular movement, for instance, it's you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that we want people to have the exact perfect messaging. For some folks, that is the perfect message. For other folks like us, it's a miss. It's largely miss. The intent is positive, but also fucking the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so for me, I'm like, this was definitely, I feel like a misstep. But for many folks in our community, this was also like, hey, great representation. And I'm glad that you spoke about it on a public platform. And I think the only thing I can draw away from this is the fact that, in the very least, the discourse is now happening. And I really hope that people are open to that conversation as to what the misstep was, and that we can, as a movement, I think, seize that particular moment for the sake of pushing what I feel and what we feel is the actual correct messaging, and that people are open and receptive to it. That's the best way I can format it. I'm like, I kind of sort of I feel you, bro. I feel you, but maybe just say the bare minimum. The bare minimum. But yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Absolutely. And Lalo, I know, folks in Mexico may have a completely different viewpoint on just the Aguilar's period, right? So I'm interested in hearing like what are some of those viewpoints, if any, that you share or your friends and family share.
Pues a mí no me gusta el chisme.
Pero
Pero no, no, I don't follow these people. I don't listen to their music, but I saw the video, and I really think que el señor, yo sí pienso que estaba referring about the marches, pero la morrilla cuando dijo somos legal, ese ya es otro pedo. Like why put emphasis en legal, like ese ya es otro pedo, pero sí, no me gusta meterme en esos pedos, like en esos rollos, pero sí pienso que lo que dijo el señor sí fue como puesto out of context, pero sí, no, I don't see the point of why put emphasis on like, oh, but we're here legal, porque ya, pues sí, no, like, it's mostly, that's what happens when you have mobility, or when you've never gone through a stage, o tu vida no está marcada by immobility.
Yeah.
That's what happens when your life is not marked by immobility. You don't perceive your life the way we do. You don't live your life the way we do. Like I know I'm over here deported, but I still speak as a we, because I grew up and I have this sense of community, and I grew up undocumented. My family's undocumented. Luckily, like now my mom and my brother are not anymore, but most of the family over there is, like, pero sí, that's what happens when people have this I don't know, this privilege of mobility. They don't, no nos ven.
Yeah.
Se les olvida. And again, right, like this is what we had, Latinos for Trump. This is what we had, folks who are like, it's them, not me, right? I can even see how Angel Aguilar saying legal Mexican Americans to make a point for people who think that all Mexicans are undocumented or all Latinos are undocumented, right? But like again, why this need to like detach? Like, yo no soy como ellos. Ellos ahí con su pedo, nosotros somos aquí. Some of us do it the legal way, right? And so it's always been an ongoing, narrative that people who are here for generations but look different don't want to be connected to the people who are getting, who are under attack, and they use it as a way to defend themselves, right? Don't take me, I'm not one of them, like I am, but I'm like right now, girl, if you look like us, they cannot tell the difference. So, mejor like let's all stick to the same narrative and stick to like, hey, nobody should have to deal with this, right? But that's on that. But again, to thank you so much. We're at time. Lalo, thank you so much for joining us today in esta plática and sharing your experiences. We really thank you for answering some questions that we had in the last episode. So appreciate you, and thank you all so much. Any last words, Cecily?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again, Lalo, Jesus, Julio, Pablo, for engaging in this beautiful conversation. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe, give this video a like, share with your friends, share with your tia, your prima. Let them know to follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, and TikTok, as we will be posting clips and obviously info on the books and topics we discussed today. Lalo, Jesus, I'm going to give you all, the last words. Si quieren decir algo, despedirse from the audience and maybe where they can connect with you to follow your work further.
Yeah, well, again, like, thanks for the invite. It's awesome to be in a space, to be sharing spaces with people who I admire and who have made a difference in my life. And aunque ni me topen, but
Así
but
es,
yeah,
Julio.
and it's awesome to see all the work that goes behind this project. No, de ustedes está bien chingón, and I would love to continue this translocal. Like more than transnational, it's like a translocal network. And that's what I've been trying to do. Más conectar con undocumented allá, deported here, and yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. Estoy como el deportee, el_deportee, y también el proyecto que acabamos de sacar que se llama Unauthorized Movimiento. We're going to start putting stuff out there too regarding film, deportees and returnees who are doing film here. So
Beautiful.
Yeah, muchas gracias.
Thank you, Lalo. Jesus, any last words?
No, thank y'all so very much for this beautiful conversation. We had a whole roster of other questions that we wanted to pose, and maybe perhaps this won't be the last time that you'll join us on this podcast. So thank
All
you.
right, muchísimas gracias. Once again, please remember to subscribe and give this video a like, share with your friends so that we can continue to work. And per usual, we'd like to remind you today and always, please support your undocumented creatives, whether it's in the US or in Mexico, right? Because that's how we continue to foster community and build stronger ties with one another. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much for joining in on this beautiful conversation. Y nos vemos para la próxima. Adios.
Don't call your ex.
I was gonna say.
Bye.
All right, y'all. Bye.